This happened last December. I'm a medical student, but since I was traveling in January, I decided to work as a caregiver in a nursing home for the old, dependent people. When I first arrived, there was this woman that was dying. She was very old and in bad shape. That was really tough for me since I'd never seen anyone die or even dead. Anyway, I worked for a few days and I came back one afternoon. My co-workers told me that the lady died the day before. Usually when someone passes in a nursing home, the caregivers do the preparing of the body. But this woman had a contract with the funeral home and they were doing it. But for some reason they couldn't take her already, so they put her on a cold bed in her room until they could come back. The blinds were closed, the lights were off, and obviously the door locked. Only people working here had a key to unlock every door. 5 days after passing away, she was still here. It was a morning and we were 3 caregivers in our building. We'll call them Claire and Anna. It was 8 a.m. I was with Claire, who was giving food aid to another lady. The phone rang. We had one phone where we received an alarm bell when a resident was asking for help by pulling on that string like in a hospital. I saw the room 424 and said I'll go for it. I was new, so I couldn't remember who was in that room, but as I was walking the hallway getting closer to the room, I remembered. And I froze. I ran down the stairs looking for Claire and asked if she knew if anyone was coming to the dead lady's room, thinking this might be her family or the funeral people. She frowned and said she didn't think so. This was getting a bit confusing. I looked for Anna, asking her the same, and she told me she'd no idea. The phone kept ringing. Anna told me to go check if anyone was inside the room. This could be her family asking for something. So, I went back. The door was unlocked and the light was on. I knocked on the door. "Hello?" I said, and no one answered. I did not have the guts to go inside, but I could see the lady was still here. I truly was shaking. I pressed the little button close to her door to deactivate the alarm and ran back again to my co-workers, explaining to them what the fuck was going on. I said I deactivated the button and then the phone rang again. Claire told me to stay here and give the food aid while both of them were going to see what was going on. When they came back, they told me the most chilling thing. No one else was inside that room. The body was untouched. They called many people working here and no one was supposed to come. But mostly the reason why the phone kept ringing was that the alarm button, which was under her bed, was ripped from the wall. For those asking about the smell of the body, saying that you can't leave a body more than a few hours, etc., actually you can. And there wouldn't be any smell. Funeral workers would come and put the deceased people on a cold bed. Don't know how these work precisely, but the body is kept very cold. That also allows the family to come by and see them. I get that this is weird for you, but this is not that unusual in France. I've worked in a different nursing home and bodies would be left in a cold bed in the room for 1 or 2 days. 5 or 6 days is very extreme, however, in a way that I think is a bit disrespectful for the lady and the family. It's a long time to wait. Also, about the button and the alarm. In the room there is a big red button attached to the wall by a string. It's close to the bed. That's what residents press if they need any kind of help. And then, at the entrance of every room, there's a little button to show your presence. It's a small green button that you use when you are in a resident's room. There would be a green light over the door outside, so if the family or the doctor wanted to come in the room, they would wait. Also, it deactivates the alarm of the same room. You push once, there's a green light, then you push again, and there'd be no light above the room. I was about 9 years old. My dad, me, and my siblings went on a vacation to my grandparents' house that's so far away from home. To visualize the setting, my grandparents' house was half renovated with a living room and upstairs room. It was a deteriorating ancestral house, but the kitchen, bathroom, the upstairs that used to be a boarding house with a few rooms, and backyard was still the original house, not renovated at that time. Everything was still in construction, so the TV was in the kitchen because the living room was a mess. It was midnight and we were watching a TV show with two of my cousins, my sister and my aunt. We'd laugh so loud at the shows and during advertisements, cracking jokes. After a while, suddenly there was a very loud noise from upstairs. It sounded like kids running around, and we thought it was my aunt's children's playing, but we didn't even have the time to shout at them because this loud noise came downstairs, and I think the best way to describe it was like a brown-coloured wind or smoke speeding with stomping sounds down the wooden stairs. It passed by the TV and into the sink where the glasses in the rack rattled. We were still frozen in shock and fear and confusion. The wind came back from the sink and past the TV again and up again to the stairs with the stomping feet noise, which sounded like it's in a hurry, running up the stairs. The frames hanging on the walls of the stairs shook and one of it even fell. I couldn't believe at the moment in my life that I'd just witnessed something that I cannot explain. I've told this story to a lot of people. Some did not believe me and some did. My aunt, who always cooked in that kitchen, said she was used to that paranormal as well as my cousins and my dad who grew up in that house. They seemed to brush it off the day later and after, but my mind as a child at that time was horrified to my core. That experience is something that will haunt me forever, even now, in my adulthood. I just want to preface this with the fact that I'd never experienced anything paranormal before this year, beyond observing questionable light orbs in my own iPhone videos taken on touristy ghost tours. I've always been skeptical about claims of the supernatural, and now I wish I could go back to being blissfully unaware. I say that because I'm pretty much convinced my brother's house is haunted by something or someone who seems to hate his guts and wants him to leave. Without divulging too many personal details, I'll just say that my brother is an automotive technician who lives in Virginia. He's the kind of dude who listens to metal, drinks whiskey daily, has tattoos, and wears tactical boots, goes off-roading, goes to shooting ranges, and has a girlfriend from New Jersey who helps him with anything technically savvy, given how he is largely computer illiterate. During my entire life, he has always jovially insulted me with mocking nerdy names like Urkel Dirkel and was always quick to get into fights and arguments until the last few months after moving into his new place, a seemingly quiet suburban home built in 1977. Now he's far more soft-spoken and respectful, fearful, filled with anxiety, sleep-deprived, and kindly asks to stay at my place or have me sleep over at his whenever his girlfriend is out of town on work or visiting family in Jersey. It's a sea change in his behaviour, and it has everything to do with what we believe is a poltergeist tormenting him. And by we, I mean multiple other witnesses, including his girlfriend, friends, co workers, and house guests. He dreads going back to his own home at night, despite once being proud and elated about finally having his own basement, a man cave, and is currently relieved to be on vacation. It started with him coming home from work and finding the overhead fan in the garage turned on nearly every day of the week. He thought this was just his girlfriend turning it on and messing with him, but she denied it and thought he was doing it to mess with her. Fans and lights seemed to just go on by themselves after coming back to the house, an ongoing problem. Then, one night when I was smoking a cigarette in the garage, I heard the door leading into the basement open. I turned around, but nobody was there. I assumed it was his girlfriend at first, but she was snug under a bunch of blankets on the couch watching TV, far from the door. She thought it was me coming back inside. Then, a few weeks later, both my brother and I were smoking a cigarette in the garage, and we both witnessed the doorknob turn with distinct sound, and the door pushed itself open with considerable force, despite it being an old door that gets jammed in the frame. There was no HVAC or air conditioning on, but then again, air pressure doesn't turn a doorknob. We both reacted in real time, saying, "What the fuck?" to each other and talked about it all night. We then learned his girlfriend had seen the handles of a plastic bin seemingly open by themselves. One of our friends also expressed fear of going into the garage because he said he felt someone standing beside him, breathing as he went to grab a couple of beers from the fridge in the garage. From there, things just escalated quickly. My brother was putting away a liquor bottle in his liquor cabinet in the kitchen and noticed a knife on the counter jump up 2 inches in front of him. He did an experiment, slamming in the same cabinet door, but the knife or other objects did not move from the vibration. On a different day, he heard a canister of garlic salt fall over inside one cabinet, and 5 minutes later, a box of pasta from a totally non-adjacent pantry fall over as well. Then, when he had one of his mechanical buddies over to the house, they both simultaneously heard a loud, prolonged scream of a feminine voice coming from the upstairs hallway while they entered the basement through the garage. And both looked at each other saying, "What the fuck was that?" basically. When my brother was later explaining this to his girlfriend, her computer crashed in the nearby study and was on the floor instead of on our desk where it had been sitting. So, my brother talked with the HOA guy in the neighborhood, and he told my brother that a few decades ago the pastor used to live in the house, a holier-than-thou type who despised drinking, smoking, and loud music. 3 things my brother enjoys on a daily basis. He said the pastor had to be dragged out of the house when dying, being overly attached to the property, and later died in the hospital. The next-door neighbour confirmed this, saying he died when he was young. She also confirmed that the previous owners, a family with little kids, quickly moved back to their home state of Texas after they became freaked out by noises and a sense of dread in the basement, along with a faint smell of cigarettes in the ground floor hallway leading to the house's 2 bedrooms, despite nobody in their family smoking cigarettes. The neighbour also refused to ever step foot in my brother's house. I searched online and found no records of anyone dying in the home, but that would exclude a person like the pastor dying at the local hospital. Just last Sunday, my brother then drunkenly started cursing at the ghost out loud and insulting him for being an uptight, righteous pussy pastor while he sat in the basement watching TV. We both heard a rumble upstairs and didn't know what it was until we later went upstairs and found that the attic door was open and shoved to the side, revealing an eerie, dark chasm in the middle of the hallway into the attic above. You might think that's unremarkable, but the attic door is thick and heavy, inset into the ceiling by about 3 full inches. Requires some muscle to lift it up and over, and it's about 10 feet above the hallway floor, requiring a stepladder for any person of normal height to reach it. I left in the middle of the night after he passed out for obvious reasons. I didn't want to stay, but I hung out with my brother the very next night at my place instead. That's because he refused to go back to his own home after waking up in the morning, messing with the thermostat in the same hallway right before going to work, and hearing a female voice moaning so loud it rattled his bed in the master bedroom next by. He noticed and continued to sleep at my house the following night, Tuesday, and on Wednesday we went to a local bar restaurant with a friend before going back to the house. Sure enough, the lights were on in the house despite him turning off all the lights after he had left days earlier, and his girlfriend was presently out of town, on vacation in Florida with friends, waiting for him to come down there when work permitted. I helped him pack for his trip to the airport the next day, and sure enough, in the middle of the night after he passed out, I finally heard a faint female moaning voice coming from upstairs while I slept on the basement couch. Sorry to dump all of this on you guys, but I just have to vent because this is extremely bizarre, and I don't know where else to unload all of this but Reddit. If you made it this far, thanks for reading. It's a cool house. He loves what he's done to the basement, and they've sunk some money into the place, decorated it, and I've helped mount a big flat screen TV on the family room wall with a swivel. They probably moved into the home, but I'm afraid they won't live there a full year given the escalation. My brother jokes around that he has 2 roommates who don't pay rent, the pastor and the moaning lady, but he's visibly shaken by this. His mental health is not okay, and I fear this will soon become a financial burden for them if they have to move again. One of our friends is currently trying to convince him to set up cameras or audio recorders in the house, if only to prove to people he's not losing his mind. Good thing he has other witnesses. I'm not sure if this belongs, but give it a read and let me know what you think, or if you've had a similar experience. My dad died this previous week. He was very sick, but I didn't know him very well, We were getting back in touch, but I hadn't heard from him in a while, and he died very suddenly. His funeral was yesterday, and after an emotional day, the family was eating. I remember picking my teeth, wishing I had dental floss numerous times. I didn't ever pick my teeth when I got home. Whatever it was stopped bothering me, and I was so exhausted I just went to sleep. I woke up this morning and made my bed and brushed my teeth. I keep dental floss picks in a bag by my sink, like untouched by the cats, and still did not floss. Then I showered. I left my room and came back there, and there was a dental floss pick on my bed. I thought it could have been my cats getting one from behind the trash because they're crazy, but let's be real, I haven't flossed in a while, and the floss was completely unused. It was placed on my bed in a way like someone put it there for me to find, not thrown carelessly, discarded, or upside down. This just happened. I just walked into my room and stared at it, inspected it, threw it away because I felt crazy for even thinking about a spirit doing that, and then I sat down and I cried. It's just such a weird thing. I don't know how it got there. I really am struggling to believe that my cats did it. Is it possible that this was a ghost or a spirit parting encounter? But was this a gift? It's a strange gift. Dad's funeral was last night, and the after service meal I needed dental floss. The next morning, under mysterious circumstances, there's unused dental floss pick on my bed. I responded with this a few days ago to a person asking about experiences with a long-fingered image they have seen. I would really like to know and talk to any others who have experienced anything similar. Original response below. I know it's hard to talk about, but if anyone wants to share, I'm all ears, or eyes in this case since I'm reading. 40s here, sane, married, job, house, car, sober, etc. Just for context, I joined this sub just a couple of months ago, but this message stood out to me, so I thought I'd share. I call it the bumblebee hands as a kid. It came in the form of night terrors, a faceless head at the end of a long hallway, a figure outside my bedroom window looking up at me, hands that would pop up over the side of the bed, then retract. A figure walking from bedroom to bedroom in our hallway, always with those hands. I've always just said I was an over-imaginative kid. I also was allowed to watch any horror movie, and my family were kind of not the greatest. I was the kid that would jump from his bed to the hallway because I was sure those hands were just waiting to grab my feet if I didn't. I also had to have my bedroom door open a bit. I still get night terrors from time to time as an adult, but you come out of it and just get on with life, I've learned how to kind of shut these dreams down. The trick is to fuck back with what's messing with you in the dream. Doesn't always work, but it's never anything like when I was little. However, here's the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. I was 8, and I really, really swear I felt those fingers touch my head one night. Just one slow, gentle swoop across my head from the headboard area of the bed. I've never forgotten it. I was awake, I pissed myself, and I lay there in my own piss for a very long time, afraid to move, heart racing and sweating so bad. I finally bolted out of the room screeching and of course woke everyone up and got yelled at and punished for pissing in my bed. I slept with a lamp on for years after that. A kid's imagination? Most likely. An actual physical encounter? I don't disbelieve, but as an adult, I don't share the story with people in my life because, they'll just say you're crazy or laugh and they don't think it was funny, I just know at the time it felt real and I was awake and I never, ever want to feel that again. It started when I went to go put laundry in the wash one day. We've a laundry room attached to our building, and it was broad daylight, so I wasn't exactly feeling nervous about anything. I got about 20 feet from the walkway or alleyway to the washroom, and I smelled the worst rotting animal smell I've ever smelled in my life. Not only that, as soon as I smelled it, I got the strongest flight or fight reaction I've ever felt. I ran back to my unit, locked the door, and had a small anxiety attack. I waited about 15 or 20 minutes before going back out, and when I did, there was no smell, and I felt normal. Fast forward about a week later, my wife and I were outside at about 1 a.m. smoking a cigarette when We heard what sounded like a dying dog. We live right off a major interstate, and we assumed an animal must have been hit. We started walking towards the direction of this noise, sort of a wheezing whine, a terribly sad noise when we got to the edge of our parking lot. As we got onto the pavement, the wheezing dog noise turned into what sounded like an owl hooting. I understand owls make strange noises. I was raised in Texas. I've heard many, but this was not an owl. The longer we listened to it, the more it sounded like a person trying to mimic an owl. My wife called out, "Hey, is someone there?" pretty loudly, and just silence was the response. We stood quiet a few moments before the owl noise completely stopped and the sound of an unnatural laugh echoed from the trees. The only way I can describe this noise as it was like when a deaf person laughs, like they can't hear how they sound, so it just kind of sounds a bit off. I don't mean to sound rude at all, truly, that's just the only way I know how to describe it. It felt like ice water was in my veins as soon as I heard it. Both of us just felt extreme fear in that moment and ran back into the house. I could explain off all of these things if I hadn't seen what I had seen next. A few days later, I was outside smoking around 7 p.m. and I saw two men walking on the side of the street where I had heard the noise a few nights prior. They walked past the trees a little ways, but then stopped. It was dusk, so light was low. One of them turned on their phone light and shined it into the trees before jumping back. Both men took off at a full sprint from the tree line. I have no idea what they saw. I didn't hear anything, but there was pure fear there. The most frustrating part was I was looking right at them and saw absolutely nothing. Fast forward about a week later, I get a text when I'm at work from my wife telling me she heard our daughter talking and laughing in the field across the street. She was 100% sure it was her until she realized she was inside her room. She said it sounded just like her. Fast forward again a few days later. I found dried blood on my door jamb, as well as scratches near my doorknob, and more dried blood at the bottom of my door. My neighbour had their internet cables cut and told me that someone had tried to open their door the night it happened and then slammed their body against the door, trying to break it in. My neighbour said he forced himself out the door, ready to confront whoever was there, but there was no one. We constantly hear things on the roof. Things in the alley behind our place, or our dog will run to the door at random hours and sniff and growl like someone is there. I probably made a mistake by calling out to this thing, whistling at night and trying to antagonize it because I desperately want a recording. I've one recording of its noises. It sounds like an owl, but towards the end there's this low, inexplicable moan that comes from the same place the owl sounds are coming from. It's hard to hear it and ends very abruptly. I don't feel like this is good enough. No one believes me, but something is out there. I know it. I know it. I feel it watching me. If I curse at it or try and lure it out, and it goes completely silent or does that horrible laugh. I can never seem to catch the laugh or any of the noises. As soon as I hit record, it usually stops. I don't know how to explain this, but I know I'm not crazy. Please, if someone can help me, I really want to know what this thing is. I have pictures of the blood on my door, the scratches, the video of the owl sounds and the moan. I just feel like no one will take this seriously. It always smells like a corpse when it's around. That's the biggest sign something isn't right. I brought it up to one of my native co-workers and he said leave it be. Wash the blood from your door and stop trying to talk to it. He wouldn't tell me anything else. I don't know if this is a Wendigo or a skinwalker or something else entirely, but I've never felt such dread and fear as I do when I hear or smell it out here. Please, someone, anyone, if you know what this is, please tell me. I'm not losing my mind, and if it's real, how do I make it go away? This is something I experienced back in 2019 while studying in secondary level. Before I start, my school is really old and it should be considered as an historic site. During the Japanese invasion, bodies were buried beneath our school floors. Already, chills are sound down my spine writing this. It was around 1 p.m. after lunch break. I wanted to collect my books from my locker, which is situated at the highest floor of our school. Before entering, you'll see the statue of Mary glaring at you, scrutinizing your every move. It was already frightening to see her haunting face, but the location itself was already isolating. When you reach one side of the hallway is filled with lockers and the other is a storeroom. In front of you is a science lab. Anyway, I went to the further end of the hallway to collect my books. As I was walking, I felt dread weighing over shoulders. I felt that something was amiss. I ignored my instincts, which will later cost me, eventually. I sat on the floor, taking my sweet time removing books from the locker, and I heard footsteps made from a heel within the science lab. The sound was extremely loud as the floors were made of wood. I paused and really tried to focus on the sudden noises. It grew louder with each passing minute before coming to a halt. I peered into the classrooms and the lab, but nobody was there. The sky grew gloomy. I stood there waiting for someone to appear, but after minutes of waiting, there was no sign of teachers. In fear, I paced towards the exit. After a few steps, I heard voices of children laughing and running around right behind me. This was odd, since children should not even be here as it was a secondary school. The noise wasn't even from the outside since it was a Monday and there aren't any physical activities on the first day of school. I sped up my walk. Suddenly, all the lockers in unison were making loud and brash noises from the inside. The inside. I jumped 10 steps, almost broke an ankle, and ran back to the classroom. I cried in front of everyone. Everyone thought I was hysterical. I never went back up again. I told my classmates to bring my books from upstairs. In my final year, no joke, my locker was situated on the lower level as well, but in a different building. My life didn't start out easy. I was handicapped by addicted parents and then into the foster system until I aged out. With being at rock bottom before I could control any aspect of my surroundings, it made it understandable that I wouldn't turn into a productive member of society. Only to continue with the cycle I'd been burdened with. For a very long time, I assumed my choice of friends, couch hopping, and addictions could be blamed on everything but myself. When I was 19, I already moved around a great deal of different couches and on the verge of being homeless. I'd also gotten into some pretty heavy drugs for about 6 months at that point. The place I found myself staying at was a party house. The The entire place trashed and not fit for humans to live inside. Yet, so many of us passed out after taking our voice of choice to wake up and do the same thing. I guess that wasn't really living. A new girl showed up one night. I've never seen her before and thought she looked too, well, shiny to be around us. She almost had a light coming off her. I didn't talk with her and I didn't know who she came with. I quickly drowned in my own vices and blacked out for most of the night. I woke up to see her on the couch, face far too pale. I got up and turned her over on reflex. I suddenly felt very sober when I saw fluid coming from her mouth. I didn't think it was possible for someone like me to act in a proper way in such a dire situation. Somehow, we got her help at the right time. She lived and needed her stomach pumped. I never even learned what her full name was. After the ambulance left with her, it all hit me at once. Sure, I grew up in terrible conditions, but she clearly didn't. She nearly died by going down the same path. She made the same choice I did, but she never should have been there long enough to make that choice. We all knew better. I felt as if I nearly killed her along with the person she bought the booze and drugs off that night. We all had choices. Sure, and at first things may have started out terrible, but I made the choice to not try and improve my life. I'd gotten to this point because of my own. I couldn't keep blaming everyone else on things I couldn't control. After that night, I got away from that group of people and did everything possible to become a better person. I never wanted to almost the reason why someone died or keep pinning my problems on anything else. Sure, crap happens, but you can always do something to improve, even the slightest. The first year was rough, really rough. I nearly died from withdrawals, or at least it felt like it. I worked hard not to fall for the same vices, feeling the need down to my bones. An ache always there, wanting and needing the poison I refused to give my body. I'd hoped this feeling would always be with me, but some days I might not even notice it, and others I almost couldn't get out of bed due to it. For over 5 years, I stayed clean. No drinking, only cigarettes to calm my nerves. Even when weed became legal, I didn't touch it. My life looked great for how I started out. Then the world came around and pulled the rug from under me. I lost my job for no fault of my own. The pandemic really did a number on my company and they needed to cut back on employees. I needed a job and went so far as to take a few fast food shifts to keep my apartment. With the work hours not coming in and bills piling up, I sunk down to a bad mindset. That feeling of wanting something to take the edge off, nearly overtaking everything else. I was at my fast food job about to clock out for the night and everything cleaned up, and I had another co-worker with me. He'd gone out to take out the trash 10 minutes ago. The dumpster just 5 steps outside the door, and I got worried a bag ripped and he needed help cleaning it up. I opened the back door, smelling the reason why my teenage co-worker was taking his damn time. I went around the dumpster to find him and 2 other people huddled away from the cameras. The cameras weren't pointed at the door, only at the dumpster to prove the trash got taken out. No homeless men got trapped inside overnight. The company didn't care to see if anyone went back inside, so that's how he got away with smoking. At this angle, the camera didn't see them if they crouched down. Dude, couldn't you do this after our shift? Just come in and clock out and come back inside, I said. Feeling pretty annoyed, he was getting high out back and not helping me with the end of shift cleaning. Holy shit, Noah, I thought you died or something, one of the older guys said between coughs. I looked at him long and hard, the lines of his face making him look 10 years older than he should, his teeth half missing and fingers stained from smoking. He was one of the guys I hung around with, and the other one with him was my dealer back in the day. I got acid reflux just looking at these two. Sure, I was working at a crappy fast food place, but I could have ended up missing most of my teeth and huddling in the back of a dumpster getting high at 1 a.m. Clinton, my older dealer, laughed at seeing me after all these years. His laugh turned into a long, loud cough that did not sound so good. You two look like you died 10 years ago. Come on. I grabbed my co-worker by the arm and lifted him up. He protested but let himself get dragged inside. I pushed him in and closed the door so I could face the two from my past. I hated the smell of them mixed in with the rotten food in the dumpster. Dylan stood up, careful to be out of the way of the cameras, as if he knew where they were. Hell, I bet these two provided for half the people working here. I crossed my arms, trying to look tougher than I was. They were pretty thin and worn down from continuing on with life I abandoned, but I knew they could kick my ass if it came to it. You got a girlfriend these days? Dylan asked, shuffling over. The smell of him made me want to puke, but that ache came back. This still lit joint in his hand, reminding my body of what I'd been refusing for so many years. I shook my head, wanting to get myself back on track. These two needed to piss off and never come back. I didn't want my co-worker hanging around them. They always led people down the wrong path by promising such little things to start with. You two, I started, and got cut off. They both got close, and I was forced against the door. I refused to let the fear of them show in my face. For a second I thought they might get violent, but for what reason? I didn't think I left owning them money, and stealing my co-worker away didn't matter. If they were going to do a deal, it would have been finished 10 minutes ago. If you need money, we have this shack going again. You should bring a girlfriend over. We pay pretty good, Dylan said, his voice low. Clinton looked around nervous. He kept scratching at his arms and clearly wanted to leave. A cold wave came over my entire body. I heard about the shack, but never confirmed if what went on in there really happened. If even half of the terrible stories were true, I needed to bring the full force of the law down on whoever was running it, and fast. I've went to the shack once to deliver a package, but didn't go inside. I just handed off what was needed and left. I only got asked because I was trustworthy enough to know the location. After leaving that life behind, I forgot all about it until Dylan brought up those memories. And I shook my head, but he kept talking. Just think about it. We can pay you and other stuff too. I can tell you need it, the dealer said, and his friend laughed a bit too, loudly. My hands were trembling. I gripped my arms tighter, trying to hide that fact. I hated what he said, held a little truth. I wanted to forget about my bills and stress for just one night, or at least for a few hours. At the end of hard shifts, I found myself wondering if just one night would really hurt in the long run. Get fucked. I turned on my heel, opened the door, and it hit Dylan in the face with it. I slammed the door before he could attack me for hitting him. They came around the front to bang on the glass once and left. They knew they were cameras at the front and in the parking lot because we've had people smash the windows before. My co-worker asked me what that was all about, but I went into a lecture about him hanging around those guys. I may have told some tall tales to scare them enough to never want to see them again. Each story was based in truth, so I didn't feel bad about sorta lying. I got him safely home because I didn't trust him getting on the bus properly. Once he was inside his place, I drove off, just making a long loop of the city, the thoughts of the night eating me away at me. I didn't know if Dylan was messing with me, mentioning the shack. I debated calling the cops to check it out, but if they found nothing, that would tip off Dylan and Clinton. Plus, anyone else running it. They would know who called, and that risked my life. I didn't want what I heard about to keep going on, but I also didn't want to be kidnapped and killed for reporting it. That made me feel selfish. I had to do something. I decided on going to the shack myself and checking it out. If I gathered some evidence that led to the right people getting arrested, it might work out. It also might get me killed spying on them and secretly filming what went on around the shack. And who knows, maybe Dylan was just messing with me and the old rotten place fell down years ago. I didn't work the next day and got ready for my new mission. I put on some boots for hiking, a water bottle, and my cell phone, and external battery for it. After all these years, I still remember the location in the middle of the woods, only after going to it once. That was my one useless talent. I could remember to go anywhere, even in the dark, after going there a single time. That talent didn't really come in handy very often. I arrived in the woods in the middle of the day. It didn't look like it though. Grey clouds overhead and the trees bare. It wasn't overly cold for the season, but I still zipped up my jacket. I parked my car a block away and started to walk down the dirt road that led into the woods. I quickly went off the path at the tree marked with red spray paint, faded with age. It wasn't a very long walk from the road to the small rundown shack in the middle of the woods. I don't even know why it was ever built out there. Maybe a hunter did it for when he spent time in the woods, or other people just took it over in time. Every step caused dead leaves or twigs to crunch under my feet. A sharp breeze blew, making me stop for a second and get the dirt from my eyes. The wind picked up. When I opened my eyes again, I was met by a baseball bat in mid-swing, a second away from impacting my head. I could only stand and take the hit, unable to move out of the way in time. The hit knocked me over, but not out. The other two swings of the bat took care of that. I'd been so stupid. A pair of guys that had burned out their brain cells for most of their life outsmarted me. I couldn't forgive myself for falling for such an obvious trap. When my eyes opened, being awake came with throbbing headache. I jumped my body, tied down to a chair, so I didn't get very far. I glanced around, trying to figure out how bad of a situation I landed myself in. I was inside the shack, and that much was clear. The floor made of packed down dirt and faint light showing through cracks in the wooden boards for walls. The single window dirty and covered in spider webs. Clinton waited for me to wake up. He smiled and called out for Dylan, who apparently took a few steps outside to use the washroom because I took so long to wake back up. A red light made me focus on a camera mounted in a small space hidden between Clinton for a second. "Oh, good. You woke up. I thought we'd need to dump some water on you or something," Dylan said when he came back inside. If they hadn't put duct tape over my mouth, I would have told them off. He ordered Clinton to get the camera set up outside, saying that the shack was too small for what they needed to do. Countless horrible mental images ran through my head of what these two had planned. They dragged me in the chair outside, the sun starting to set to show how long I'd been out for. A camera on a tripod sitting outside, hooked up to a laptop. Why would these two record this? Wouldn't that bite them in the ass? They made sure I was in frame, and from the looks of things, the camera was recording the entire time. My stomach sank when I assumed right that this was being live streamed. Dylan saw my expression and smiled. He loved being in a position of power over someone who saw him worth less than a cockroach. We're live streaming this. We get paid pretty good for these shows, but lately we've run through most of our connections to you, so thank God we came across you. We always knew you thought you were too good for us. We had a bet if you called the cops or come by on your own. The outcome would have been the same. We would put on a show, but if it was with the cops, we would need to find a new place to hold the shows. What was he, a Saturday cartoon villain? Why bother telling me any of this? I already felt more terrified than I had in my entire life. Telling me details of what was going to happen wouldn't add to that. I soon realized the reason why he went on talking for as long as he did. Neither him or Clinton were going to be the ones to put on the show. They were just the ones to lure others into a run in the camera. No, the main star still in the woods. When it came into view, I knew my previous statement being false. I couldn't even feel more fear. My body shook and I screamed through the duct tape. Standing between two trees came a massive creature, one that should be impossible to get to this size. I've never seen one in person, but knew what looked at right away. A wild boar. The features mostly what all boars had. A long line of bristled fur ran along its back. Two massive and stained tusks came from the side of its mouth. The thing came closer, and I swear Dylan's head didn't reach the boar's shoulders. How the hell did this thing get so damn big? I stared directly into the boar's eyes, seeing how unnatural they looked. Another breeze came, and it blew away leaves from the clearing we all stood in. The dirt once hidden under the leaves, a dark red colour that twisted my stomach. I had no trouble figuring out what the next few minutes held. The boar getting ever closer, the rancid breath overpowering my senses. For a brief second, the eyes of the creature glowed a bright white, then the thing came down on me with all its weight. I felt the teeth rip into me, down to my bones. I screamed a muffled sound, my entire mind only feeling pain. I wasn't even aware the chair broke apart and my bindings came undone. If I was being eaten alive, then what was the point of knowing that? Those teeth weren't sharp, and I wished they were. They ground against my bones, eating and pulling something out of them, and then pulled at something so deep within myself. The pain went beyond my physical body and into a part I never knew was there until those teeth found it. Piece by piece it tore out from me. I didn't think anyone should feel this much pain and still be alive. I begged for death, only to have my mind finally shut down. After everything, I fully expected to be dead or in pieces in front of the shack, barely alive. I opened my eyes to sounds of people shouting. Sitting up, my body oddly was whole. My chest felt light though, too light. I was missing something I didn't have a name for. I screamed when I saw the boar nearby. The camera and laptop crushed under massive hooves. A choking scent came over us and I found the source. Instead of tearing me apart, the boar had made a messy meal of Dylan and Clinton. I got sick and heard the shouting again. In the distance I noticed flashlights in the dark trees. "They shall take your freedom. Come along with me." A voice spoke and it took me a few seconds to figure it out. It came from the boar. The words deep and they rolled over the dead leaves. The voice much like I assumed a king might have. I looked again at the humans making their way over and knew right away they were cops. If they saw me standing in the middle of, well, Dylan and Clinton, Questions I did not have the answers for were bound to come up. The boar that caused me so much pain, and I hesitated and got over to it, and the thing nearly left me behind. With some issues, I climbed up on the wide back, and we were off running through the trees, far away from the bloody scene. The powerful beast ran like the wind. I kept a tight grip on the fur, my body feeling so light, the fast pace making it almost impossible to stay on for too long. We finally stopped, the boar tossing me off. I landed painfully at the base of a tree, but at least I was still alive. I rubbed my sore back, swearing. What the fuck? Just my angry word cut off, seeing a new sight in front of me. A man stood in front of me instead of the boar from a few seconds ago. I looked around for the monster, wondering how the hell it left so fast. I then focused on the person who replaced it, my mind working slowly. He was tall and very large, but large in a way professional weightlifters are. Most people think of a guy with muscles on muscles for that profession, but those are bodybuilders. In my experience, the guys who could lift a bus had a gut and not a six-pack. He wasn't wearing a shirt, so it made me easy to see his big arms almost as thick as a tree. He thankfully wore some sweatpants and, oddly enough, a cloth hanging over his face. Seeing the long bristled hair go down his back made me put these two pieces together. Seriously, what the fuck? I asked, feeling exhausted. The man laughed, making the cloth on his face move. He shifted arms into a stretch, but thankfully went into explaining things soon after a small warm-up. I am a god. I made a deal with those two that I'll eat the ones they bring me, and they can film it for their little side project, he explained. A pig dog? I asked slowly. Boar, he corrected, but didn't sound angry. We live to eat, and I rarely find things I haven't tasted before. Those two were running out of suitable meals, so I ate them, ready to move on. But they did bring me you. When I ate out of your bones, one of my better meals of late, and I do hope to have it again. I backed up against the tree as far as possible. He confirmed he ate something from me, but I didn't know what it was. I paused to self-reflect, trying to see what was different, and all my memories seemed intact, all my feelings. Then what was it? I still knew my name and age. The answer finally came when I noticed his light. I felt how my hands were only shaking from fear. You ate my addictions? I said, slowly trying to wrap my head around the idea. The god laughed so loudly it shook the bare trees. I winced at the sound, and because he took a step closer, his hands opened wide, and I thought he either wanted to hug me or eat me. The taste of it rotting away your bones and soul, just so sweet. I wished I had more of it. You went without vices for years, making it wear you down and get so rooted into yourself that it would have made you collapse from the inside. I love it. Those two, nothing compared to that taste. But that addiction craving is going to come back in a year or 2 or 10. You did well holding it back, and you'll do well when it returns. I'll leave you be for now, but I shall check in on you to see if you have created a meal for me in the future, he said, and his words gave me chills. I shook my head, but he refused an answer. My large hand on my shoulder, he started to guide me along, and I figured the way out of the woods. I looked up there at him, trying to think of a way to avoid the pain I felt the second time. Was it worth going through all that so I didn't have my cravings for a few years? The police, I started. Do not worry about that. They shall think an escaped feral pig or two ate the ones we left behind. They'll find some and shoot them, he said, without a care in the world. But they didn't eat them. Are you going to let two pigs take the fall for your crime? I pressed. I am a god. They live to eat and be eaten, and to serve whenever I ask. He really sounded as if he didn't care, sacrificing two lives just to leave this whole thing all neatly wrapped up. I looked at the cloth over his face, realizing I may never fully understand his reasoning or agree with it. What's with the cloth? I asked finally. He stopped, not expecting the question. He thought about it for a minute and shrugged his large shoulders. I've not decided on a face yet. I should the next time we meet. I hated the fact that I needed to see this creature again. He was a god, and I held no power to stop from coming again to be eaten away, something that is going to rot me from the inside in the future. Do you have a name, or is it just Boar God? I asked him. I expected him to think about this for longer than the answer is about the face. He came up with a name rather quick, which surprised me a little. Brawn shall be fine. He put his hands on his hips, almost expecting me to praise him for picking out a name so quickly. I didn't acknowledge it, and he awkwardly started to walk again. I started to hear sounds from the road, making it clear how close we were from reaching society. I stopped to look up at Braun and ask him if he was going to keep following me or not, or if I was free to go. I think I'm going to look around where you humans live for now. I may find a meal just as good as the one you gave me tonight. I'm going to return to you in 5 years or 10. Not matter the time frame, I am going to be back to eat the rot from your bones. You forced that desire down, and I expect you're able to do it again. You did a good job for these 5 years, little human. The god spoke, his voice a bit softer than before. I wasn't expecting those words to really mean anything. The first part I got nervous over, but I realized I didn't have a single person give me any praise for staying clean for as long as I did. I went to meetings and heard empty words from the people there, but no one really meant it. They just said it, so I repeated the same thing back to them. I'd fought for years by myself and never thought much of it because I assumed other people dealt with much worse. I didn't want to go through the same pain of having that part of me ripped out again. I knew if I gave in to avoid Braun coming around again, I would lose everything I tried so hard to achieve. I looked back on my current life, suddenly not feeling as much dread and stress as before. I still had my apartment and a job. I wasn't homelessness yet and had options compared to before. If I got through my childhood, I could handle everything right now. I guess I'll see you in about 5 to 10 years, and thanks for saving my life and, well, taking care of my other problem, I told him, a smile on my face even with my head hurting as much as it did. You really should be more careful and not let drug dealers outsmart you like this, but I do not believe solved the rot within yourself. I'll come back. You kept it down all on your own and need to do it again. I only gave you a small break. For a big scary boar god, Braun could sound pretty nice. I still didn't want to hang out with him. The cloth covering his face and the unknown behind it really creeped me out. I started walking again, leaving the tall man behind. I glanced over my shoulder a few times, expecting him to follow, but Braun disappeared after the second glance. I knew it wasn't the last time I would see him. I came out on a road near where I parked my car, unsure if that was by chance or not. My head throbbed, and it was a miracle I didn't get any lasting damage from the baseball bat to the face. I went into work the next day as if everything was normal, and got a few questions about my bruised forehead. I lied, saying I fell down my apartment steps. The co-worker who I dragged away from Dylan and Clinton started looking at me strangely. After those two didn't show up again, he assumed I got into a fight with them and won to scare them away from the place. I got a little bit of respect for that. Sure, most of them bought from those two, but wouldn't have if they knew what kind of people they were. It all came out after the feral pig story. For a week, no one at work talked about anything else between our duties. Slowly, things started to even out. I got regular hours, bills paid, and plans made. After a few months, a familiar ache started to creep back into my core. I knew I just needed to put up with it. I could do this. That rot wasn't going to drag me down after I put so much into the life I wanted. It's not much. I'm never going to change the world or cure cancer, but I'm happy with what I've worked towards. After being a farmer family living in the desert, the Chundawat decided it was time for a change and moved to northern Delhi in 1989 after selling all their farmlands. Initially, it was just Bhopal, his wife, and youngest son who moved out, but over the following 2 decades, the rest of the family moved along with him. By 2007, 12 Chundawats were living in the same house in Delhi. The family's main source of income came from their grocery and plywood shop, which they had set up on the first floor of their house. In fact, the family made good profits from the shop, and this was not just because of the quality of their goods, but also because of their warm personality. Bhopal had a real friendly personality, and the neighborhood saw him as a father figure, and his wife Narayani was a mother figure. Thus, they called them Daddy and Mummy. Narayani was a really caring woman who had a habit of giving food and drinks to the workers on the streets and also took care of the kids of the locality as if they were her own. Also, the other Chundawat, who were Bhopal's 3 children, their 2 wives, and his 5 grandchildren, were always present in the store, and they were also well respected. Bhopal met his demise in 2007, and the family suddenly lost their patriarch, but despite such a big loss, the family handled the situation quite well. Following Bhopal's death, the family started to improve in every aspect, and they also started spending longer hours at the store, which led them to set up another store with their profits. Also, the family members' health significantly improved, and they completely gave up on alcohol and tobacco. Even the kids of the family changed, and they started doing better in school. Although the neighbors noticed this sudden improvement in the family, they were only happy about it and they did not question anything. But as things unfolded, they would understand the creepiness that was causing these changes. The Chundawats, who always opened their store at 6 in the morning, did not open it on the 1st of July in 2018, and they were not responding to their neighbors' calls. Eventually, a 70-year-old neighbor walked to their house to check on the family and make sure they were all right, but he did not get any response despite knocking on their door multiple times. As he kept knocking, he accidentally twisted the doorknob, and to his surprise, the door opened. As he entered the house, yelling out the names of the family members, he saw something so terrifying that he literally fainted. He ran out of the house, screaming in fear, and the police were eventually informed. The police officer who initially checked the house at first was also not able to stay in it for more than 10 seconds, and just like the 70-year-old neighbor, ran out of it before eventually going back in with the other officials. During their investigation, the police found 11 hidden diaries that gave full insights into the road of this dreadful site. Shortly after Bhopal's death, the Chundawats called the priest to help them with prayer and honoured their lost patriarch. During the prayer, Bhopal's youngest son, named Lalit, started chanting, and it captured the attention of the other family members. A few years back, Lalit met with an accident and it took away his ability to speak. Thus, the family were completely shocked, hearing him speak out of the blue, and as his chants continued, they heard his voice slowly transform into Bhopal's voice. After this incident, Lalat kept his newly found voice. Although the initial days after this event were completely normal, things started to quickly change from the 7th of September 2007. From this day onwards, Ladat started laying out rules for the family, and the number of these rules kept increasing. These rules ranged from what, when, and how they ate, and what they did when they sold things in their shop. The intensity of the rules kept increasing every day, and at one point it felt as if the family were going through a punishment. Lala told the family that Bhopal was possessing him every night, and he used his body to write down these rules to help them save their souls. In line with these rules, the family had to reach the house before 9 p.m. and at 9 p.m. Lalit would be possessed by Bhopal and lead a prayer that lasted for almost 30 minutes. With time, the family completely accepted Lalit as Bhopal, and everyone accepted Bhopal's wife, addressed him as Daddy. With the weirdness continuing, Bhopal's grandchildren grew up, and on June 17th they organised a grand engagement party. A couple of weeks later, they invited one of their neighbours for a dinner. This neighbour noted that everything was completely normal, and everything the family talked to him was about the wedding, which was a few months away. 2 days after this dinner, the family did not open their shop, which led to the 70-year-old neighbour finding them dead in their house. 10 members of the Chundawat family were found hanging dead in the front hallway. They were hanging in a circular pattern, being very close to each other. All of their hands and feet were tied together, their eyes were blindfolded with strips of cloth, their mouths were taped and their ears were sealed with cotton balls. Underneath their hanging bodies were toppled over black stools. The remaining member of the family, which was Bhopal's wife, was lying dead in her bed with a belt next to her. The police initially thought they were murdered, but upon reading the diaries they understood that what happened was far more sinister. Lalit, who was apparently possessed by Bhopal, told his family members that in order to truly save their souls, they had to do a ritual, which he called Bad Tapasya. And in this ritual, the family members had to hang down like the roots of the banyan tree. The family practiced performing this ritual for 8 days, and during these practice sessions, they learned to tie up their hands and legs and put their heads through a noose, tighten the knot, blindfold themselves, and seal their ears with their tied hands. On the day of the ritual, the family sacrificed burnt offerings and proceeded to do the Bad Tapasya. Lalit and his wife helped the other family members get themselves in the hanging position, and since Narayani was not able to get into this position, they took her into the bathroom and strangled her to death with the belt that was lying near her. Once she showed no more movement, they undid the belt and went back to the hall to complete the ritual. They walked around the room, toppling the stools on which the family members were standing, and thus hanged them to death. Once they made sure everyone was dead, Lalit and his wife tied their limbs, put their heads through the noose, taped their mouths, blindfolded themselves, sealed their ears, and toppled the stools they were standing on. The family strongly believed that upon the completion of this ritual, the Bhopal would walk right into the room and save them from dying. To prove it, they believed that Bhopal would change the colour of the water that was left in a cup near their bodies. They had even left the front door unlocked to make it easier for Bhopal to come in and save them. The family were extremely confident that they would not die from the ritual, but things would turn out to be completely different. According to many psychologists, the suicides were because of a shared psychotic disorder, but Lalit's elder brother, who stays in the Rajasthan, claims that it was a planned murder. So, was it a suicide driven by delusion, or a well-planned murder, or the work of something paranormal that pretended to be Bhopal? I leave it to your judgment. In 1947, multiple Dutch, American, and English ships picked up a disturbing Morse code distress signal from a random area of the Indian Ocean. The distress signal said that an officer, including captain, are dead, lying in chart room and bridge. Possibly whole crew was dead. This message was followed by a meaningless Morse code, after which it said, "I die." After conveying this message, the signal ended. After hearing this signal, the ships that heard it were able to determine the exact location from where it was sent. It was determined that the ship that sent it was a Dutch freighter ship named the SS Orang Medan, and the signal seemed to be coming from the end of the Strait of Malacca. As this location was close to an American merchant ship named the Silver Star, they tried sending return signals to the Orang Medan, but despite trying multiple times, they never got any reply. Thus, the captain of the Silver Star decided to reroute and sail towards the Orang Medan. A couple of hours later, the sailors of the Silver Star discovered the Orang Medan at a distance. The ship appeared to be completely down, and it was drifting through the water with its flow. This sight, combined with the distress signal they had received earlier, made them anxious about the state of the Orang Medan's crew. As they went closer and closer to the ship, the crew noticed that the ship appeared completely deserted. There was no one on board, and all the lights of the ship were turned off. They started blowing their whistles and sending Morse code signals to the ship to get the attention of its members, but they did not get any response. With the obscurity surrounding the Orang Medan growing, the captain of the Silver Star decided to board the ship. After boarding the ship, the crew members of the Silver Star found multiple crew members of the Orang Medan lying dead on the deck. All of their corpses were lying on their back with hands stretched out in front of them. It appeared as if they were defending themselves from an assault, and all of their dead faces depict extreme fear. Also, their dog appeared to have died while growling at something. The crew members of the Silver Star were caught entirely off guard by what they had just seen, but they kept walking into the ship. As they made their way up to the bridge, they found multiple other crew members of the Orang Medan dead, literally in the same position. The only corpse that was in a different position was the body of the person who sent the distress signal. He had apparently died while still sending the signal, as his finger was still on the telegraph. After completely checking the ship and discovering multiple other corpses, the crew members of the Silver Star descended into the bowels of the ship, and they were greeted by strangeness. With no ventilation and the boiler room above it, the bowels is always really hot, but The bow of the Orang Medan was uncharacteristically cold. In fact, the crew members of the Silver Star said that they felt as if it was around 4 degrees Celsius. Despite so many dead crew members, the Orang Medan only had its engine turned off and did not have any notable damage. Also, the dead members did not have any external injuries and all of them were rapidly decomposing. This was particularly strange as the crew had sent distress signals just a few hours before getting discovered. Not knowing what caused their death, the captain of the Silver Star ordered his crew members to not touch any of those bodies. He decided to tow the ship to the mainland and seek the help of experts to understand what truly happened to its members. Thus they tied a tow line to the Orang Medan and started sailing towards the mainland. Within a few moments after moving the Orang Medan, the crew members of the Silver Star started seeing smoke coming from its inside. The smoke exponentially increased with time and they decided to cut off the tow line. Moments after cutting off the tow line, the Orang Medan completely exploded. It exploded with so much force that it was literally lifted out of the water fully, and it quickly sank into the depths of the ocean. The explosion of the Orang Medan left behind no proof of its strangeness. The captain of the Silver Star and his crew members headed to the mainland in search of answers to the things they witnessed inside the sunken ship, but they were not able to find any. The only proof of this incident is the testimonies of the crew members of the Silver Star and the other ships that received the disturbing distress signal of the Orang Medan.